Hi, ladies and gentlemen. Dave Dobbs here. I think it's the 18th today, isn't it? It's the 18th of March, 2020. And I haven't made a video in about a month. I've just needed a total break from it. You know, there's so much pressure when I kind of it just absolutely it tore me apart, actually. The last flyby and everything else that's been going on, all the news about the kind of the virus and all that's happening globally, and we're going to talk about all of that, and I'm going to cover a lot today. It's going to be a bit of a show. If we can call it a show, I don't know what you call it, but we're going to cover a lot of stuff, and really we're just tying up loose ends here, beginning the process of tying up loose ends. And you know, I've been taking you through this slow, steady picture of looking at whatever these twin tail objects are that I've been observing. And unwittingly, it's been this kind of discovery of how and what they orbit. And this slow process of inquiry that has brought us to a picture of our solar system in the way in which it hasn't been officially portrayed. We're in what we would call the Copernicus system, aren't we? The standard model. And I've got you here on this Isaac Newton 2017 50p coin. Apparently it's the rarest of all the 50p's. And it was produced in 2017, which is very fitting, because if you remember 2017, you know, we had our first big gravitational anomaly on that date because of Jupiter. And that was on the 17th of August, 2017. Do you remember, you know, I'd made a video before saying it was going to occur. And then I think it was the time I'd flown out to America to do a talk. And as I flew into America, we suddenly saw the flyby. And I'll show you some images of that in a shake if we need to keep going through this. But it's not really relevant to the story, except that on here, for some reason, you know, we've got this Isaac Newton 50p coin, and we think about the time that Isaac Newton was around. He was around about the time of he was getting, you know, all of his kind of reworkings of Kepler's law that got him kind of like the kind of fame, where he kind of like reworked Kepler's third law to define it a little bit better. And by the looks of this, this line running right through here, the center down here, is very fitting with kind of Kepler's second law, isn't it? Would it go from that? It's kind of the notion that, well, where is the kind of the perihelion point here? Just on this, using these lines here and suggesting perihelium, the closest point of an orbit to the sun, and assuming this is the sun, which it actually isn't. They're showing you a completely different thing here. And I'm going to get to that, but I just want to give you an idea of what most people are going to be seeing in this at first glance when they're looking at this line here. Some are going to be thinking about, obviously, you know, the Illuminati and the divide and conquer lines, but the others are going to be thinking about Kepler's laws, and that is that you can run a line through the center of the orbital path, and it's kind of basis that when an object goes into perihelium, it moves faster around the object than when it's furthest away from the object it's orbiting. And so and there's an exact ratio, and it's actually it's an area. So I don't know how best to describe that, but using this specific orbit here, well, actually these lines more come down from this bigger orbit here, don't they? And you can see them coming down, but doesn't go all the way down to here. But it's kind of like there's a direct ratio that a planet, when it gets closer to that which it's orbiting, it goes faster, and when it's further away, it goes much slower. But there's an exact ratio of area that is taken up. If you run a triangle down from that point, you'll find that there's an exact same amount of area kind of on both sides, even though the circumference traveled like up in this end, when it's closer to perihelion, it's going to travel faster, so it's going to travel a greater distance, but it's going to be much closer, so the amount of area is going to be whatever it is, but down here it's going to travel slower, so it's going to travel less distance. And if you run that triangle up to that point, even though it's traveled less distance, the area here makes up for it because it's so much further away that actually the areas are the same. And there's these patterns in these correlations that you observe in orbital mechanics. And of course, this is what my entire timeline has been about, hasn't it? It's been, first of all, observing this 200-day orbit, and then sort of like that I realized was actually a kind of a 198-day orbit. And then we put it in as a 200-day orbit. We'd have to delete four days every year to bring it back down to sort of like 2 lots of 200 minus 4, which is 396, which finally worked out to, oh my God, this is actually suggesting Jupiter, because that's 396. That's if you think of 396 basically divided by 13 and times 12 is 365. So this 396 day kind of a pattern that I started isolating with all these twin tail sightings that had been the kind of the main backbone of my channel, of bringing these observations, had mirrored exactly what Jupiter was as well, because Jupiter moves 1 calendar month every year. It's got an orbital period of 12 years to go right round the sun, supposedly. And so we could see that we could see that as kind of like as a 1 month transition. But if you're considering something going all the way around, you could also see that as 1 month and 1 year and 1 month, if you were assuming it was going all the way around. So it would calculate. So you think, oh, that's going all the way around. It's taking 396 days to go around. But then you're like, hang on. You look at it from another perspective and say, that could just be 1 month. And so we start, and then from that, it kind of transpired into a bigger understanding of the orbits of whatever it was. And I finally bored it down with the help of obviously Steve Olson and all the many subscribers that have kind of added to this. And I've been really, really sorry I haven't been able to kind of follow anything to do with my videos just lately. I made that last video and I just literally closed the book on it there, and then it was so much pressure on me sometimes doing it. It tears me apart. It makes my skin just go absolutely crazy. I've had this, oh God, the whole thing. So I had to stop and just give myself a little bit of a break and let us go through this whole transition of all that it was gonna be. And also I talked so long about why we shouldn't do Brexit and the dangers of it. And if we do Brexit, we're absolutely doomed. And it's a really, really terrible thing to do, because we open up Pandora's box. And once we go down that corridor, we go down a pathway which is very, very difficult to reverse and very difficult to deal with. And unfortunately, we've done that now. And so we've began that process. And of course, as we've began this process, I'd written a book in 2011, 2012, published it in 2011, 2012, saying, don't leave Europe, guys. People said, we're not going to leave Europe. What are you talking about? It's like, no, you don't understand. They want to get some sort of free trade deal. And it's going to carve everything up. And it's what's behind this free trade deal. It's terrifying. It's absolutely terrifying. It's human domination, human slavery. It's total sellout. It's complete corporate sellout. It's the same It's the same deal as the Canadians signed, and it's basically just the revenue that is generated by court cases, where your country is taken to court, runs into, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of billions. It just absolutely, you can't stop any type of corporate legislation coming in and doing whatever they want. Everything is carved up, everything. And if Europe does get fed into that, okay, it'd be fantastic for Britain. Because our law firms and all those sort of people will make so much money out of carving up Europe and selling every part of it up and just selling all of a corporate profit. But it's it's like all the worst things times a billion, just thrown into just like absolute insane. And once we start that, it's a very, very difficult thing to stop. And where there's so much to gain, invariably there's so much to lose. And unfortunately, as soon as we began that process of pushing forward with this, which basically means, sorry to go off course a little bit here, but just basically after that, you can imagine NATO is gagging for a war with Iran and Syria. It's desperate to get in there. So, and you've got Turkey now saying they're going to release all these kind of refugees into Europe if Europe doesn't back them in back NATO in a strike against what they're asking for Syria. But Israel wants NATO to strike Iran. They're pushing for all-out war, and most of this, just as just to fulfill biblical prophecy. And so to see all this going on at the same time as this flyby coming in, and now to see this next flyby coming in, which I'm assuming is coming in, I don't truly absolutely know, because this time last year I was assuming the flyby that's coming in now is coming in, and I was completely wrong. Do you remember I'd made a video saying asteroid alley ahead, and we just didn't see anything. We didn't see anything. I just couldn't understand it. And you remember June the 18th, not June the 18th, May the 4th. May the 4th be with you. May the 4th, 2018, when Kilauea, was it Kilauea Krakatoa? Kilauea on the Big Island in Hawaii, it started going bang and spewing magma like no volcano we'd ever seen. And then we get the incredible sightings, and then we get the sort of like the shots of Mars, one of the Mars rovers shuts down to a massive dust storm, and this just carries on, and then a volcano goes off on Mars, and we're like, oh my God, what the hell? The volcano that kind of like Wal Thornhill told us was caused by a plasma charge. Like he says, everything is caused by a plasma charge. And you've kind of like, we had something massive happen. So I thought, well, it must happen in 2019, because the model I was using at the time, where I was still clinging to the Copernicus idea that we were all orbiting the sun. This was Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Venus, and Mars, and all of it was all orbiting the sun, as we've been led to believe. But imagine if we'd all been missold from the very beginning, from like the 1500, 1600 kind of mark. Well, ironically, around about the time of Isaac Newton, but actually before, because Kepler was around about the time of Galileo as well, wasn't he? You had Galileo, Kepler, and that sort of stuff, and they were the ones. That's why I called my last this timeline, this new timeline I'm doing, the Galileo Zodiac, and but just finishing where I was going, because I've got multiple threads kind of going here, and the pressure of seeing what of not really knowing, especially with this second orbit, this twin that we've just had one massive twin going by, the closest one that orbits Jupiter, not the closest planet to Jupiter, but they're kind of like out of the two that are the furthest orbiting objects, the inner one of those two has just flown by, and we've had all the earthquakes and the volcanoes and the crazy weather, and the sun's just starting to come out a little bit, and now we've got, I'm assuming we've got this next one coming in. And like I say, I might be completely wrong, but I just saw Alex Lujan has just posted a shot of this object that I'm assuming is coming in, twin tail or whatever you want to call it, one of the twins. I'll show you that in two shakes. We'll drift through it, but are we going to start seeing more earthquakes and volcanoes now? Are we, in my opinion, this time last year I was expecting it like we were expecting in 2018. Like I say, is it going to start happening again now? I'm assuming it is, because again, Alex Lujan, because of his famous shot on the 1st of September 2019, last year, where he got the shot exactly where I was expecting to see, and you could see the whole tail of it. And when we looked at it, the tail was going the wrong way, and I was just like, no, no, because it meant that it was all the wrong way around. It was the final part in the puzzle where I just had to finally realize that it was what's on the 50p coin here, this coin dedicated to Isaac Newton. It is the Galileo Zodiac. That is it. So here you've got, in the inner one here, you've got Jupiter. And the outer one here, you've got Saturn. This is our dwarf planet. And this one here is our sun, with Mercury, Venus, Mars, and Earth spinning around it. And they come up around here. And when we cross these 1, 2, 3, 4, where's the fourth? Yeah, for these 1, 2, 3, 4 points, they invent a dwarf planet. They invent a dwarf planet. So you think, you know, Isaac Newton, he was, let's think about Galileo and his time. He would have been it's a little bit confusing the way this is laid out, but it's a little bit confusing the way this is all laid out, to be fair, but it is principally this line here, where you see these dotted lines here, going from this point here to this point here, ironically, is the period that we would have been affected, say the last time we're on that side, we would have experienced that would have been in 1939, when Carlos Ferrada predicted that we'd have a massive earthquake on the 20th of January 1939. And then if we go back 350 years to that same point, we come to the 20th of January again, but 1606 this time. And that's when we had a massive tsunami here, right where I'm sitting now, on the levels, on the Glastonbury levels. And then just after that, that was when Galileo said he discovered Jupiter. And that was when Copernicus came out with his model. That was when Kepler came out with all his kind of like laws of orbital mechanics. And then we go 80 years from there, and what are they all discussing? Well, Isaac Newton, ironically, is discussing what Alex Lugin just showed in the shot that he's just showed today. A comet, a massive comet. And they were calculating the movements of the comet and coming up with all of these rules of how planets moved and everything else like that. And of course, that's the arc that we've had over the top. So Carlos Ferrada is our kind of like is our kind of the Galileo of 1939, and then we've got now, which is Isaac Newton, and these, you know, that he was looking at these models. And of course, I've had this opportunity of being able to use computers and everything else like that. But these people were putting these all together just using absolute mathematics. They were genius with mathematics. It was all about the mathematical kind of like patterns that they were seeing. But okay, so there you have Jupiter. There you have Jupiter. There you have Saturn. There you have the sun's orbit coming round. And that is the system that you really live in. This is the true, it's hidden in hidden in plain sight. It's staring right at you. I mean, if I just, quite interesting what these are. I mean, in my last model, I showed you exactly the same thing, I believe. New share, if I come over to here, do you remember this one here? I showed you in the last model where I showed you how it kind of orbited around, and I just played with the numbers to show you the mathematics of what was behind Neptune. I'm just going to, hopefully you can't see that bit, but the mathematics of what was behind Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. So Uranus has got an 84-year orbit, Neptune's got a 165-year orbit, and Pluto has got a 248-year orbit. Now, this is your kind of perihelion point. This is the closest point. Perihelion, dwarfium. This is the dwarf planet. The this is the dwarf planet itself that it's all orbiting, or potentially a black star. Whatever it is that we can't see it. Is it because it is always in our southern hemisphere? Effectively, that if my palm is the bottom of the ecliptic plane of our real solar system, with the sun and just 4 planets, Mercury, Venus, Earth, and Mars, and it's going over the top of the dwarf planet constantly like this, it could be like that. But then we'd have a completely changing angle of intention of our sun. And I don't know if we do. And how long have we observed that the actual specific, we could, that would also change. That would also change where we are in the night skies, as stars in the night sky, over a massive period of 80 years. And we're not seeing that. So we have to kind of consider that it could be because it's raised up. And I'll give you some examples of some orbital mechanics of how that could work. Because like I say, all we can do is watch the actual different sightings and look at the patterns and try to edge closer. And of course, everything's been correlating so far, and I'm going to give you some amazing correlations. This is just the beginning here. This is just a warm up, but it's okay. So Uranus 84, Neptune 165, Pluto 248. I haven't got all the answers here. I'm just showing you all the patterns, and we're going to just start putting them together, and we're going to use different types of computer software to run these in kind of like in patterns that we can look at them with our eyes and see the mathematics. Because many of you got your heads around Kepler's laws and all these sort of things, and then many of you've got your ideas about the kind of like, because his third law was kind of like Kepler's third law was, I believe, or Isaac Newton upgraded and developed into where he came up with kind of like the laws of gravity, Newton's 3 laws. And and I'm not going to explore all of that because it all starts getting a little bit complicated. And if I'm actually honest with you, much of it I still struggle with because I am not trying to force the universe through their formulas. I'm trying to allow what I am seeing and what is being shown to me to be the yardstick itself, if that makes any sense. And so, okay, so Pluto 248, and look at this. If we just play with this over here, 4 times 84 is 336. And remember, we'd already worked out there's about a 340 year orbit, and we've done it of what we were assuming was planet X around our sun, but now we realize it's our sun around planet X. And 165 times 2 is 330, almost the same. So we can see how these 2 points here, or these 2 points here, or this point here, and this point here are opposing. Isn't it funny that they kind of like the same patterns exist? And if we take to the 248 years of Pluto, and it was obviously discovered here at this point here as we come in, because this would have been Ceti B mirror, this would have been Uranus, this would have been Neptune, and then this would have been Pluto. If we take 200, if we add 84 years to Pluto, we end up at this same point here, which is kind of like now where they're like saying, oh, guess what we've just discovered? Not a dwarf planet. Yes, it's a dwarf planet called Eris. And of course, Eris is the goddess that wasn't invited to the ball. And so we can see how and why these were created. We can see why Jupiter and why Uranus and Neptune look so similar, because they all were the same thing. They were Jupiter. They were observations of Jupiter, but Jupiter just too big and it couldn't be there, because how could it be there? Because Kepler's law says it can't be there. So there, Kepler says so. It's just like, guys, Kepler was like in the 1600s. It's just like, move on. Move on. You know, we haven't taken into account the fact that this object here and this object here, let's do another quick share. Okay, so look, I've just flicked across here just to get a kind of look at an orbit of, say, our sun orbiting the planet X system here. What you're not seeing here, which is a bit difficult for me to capture, is the fact that there's the planet X system right in the middle, a big bright sun, which I'm of mind is a dwarf planet, but that's in terms of proportions, that's what it came out like in the program I used to create it, but the Universe Sandbox. But imagine for a moment, let me just come back to that. Imagine for a moment that both these, we see them as orbiting each other, but imagine if both these objects are actually orbiting our Milky Way. That's their real orbital track. And their orbit is not so relevant to each other. It is relevant to each other because they're in a binary relationship. But we are not, in Kepler's law, fully bringing in the relationship of a tertiary field, which is the galactic center, or the kind of like the Milky Way, into these orbital mechanics. Because if two things were orbiting each other, they have a certain type of relationship. And what happens when two things are orbiting something else but are in an orbital relationship? Say, like, if I come forward here and we see much more the idea of that, we can see that here in this idea, we can see the whole angle of intention of the sun going round changes its whole angle of intention and goes back round and loops back round and comes around. But can you imagine how this would alter so much of how we would see the universe around us? We'd have stars, surely, all over the place. You know, everything would be moving as we moved along with the sun in 350 years, and we'd have a very clear, and yet it doesn't seem to be the case. And we seem to have this thing where we have this constant angle of intention of our sun and this dwarf planet, whatever it is. So that's the only reason I just showed you those, to try and give you an idea about what's not really touched upon and wasn't really explored in Kepler's, as I'm understanding it, Kepler or Isaac Newton, what he was putting forward. And so we're in this place. This is the place that we come back to, this place that Nassim Haramein brought us to when he showed us his idea of orbital mechanics, and how, where he said the Earth isn't orbiting the sun, it's orbiting whatever the sun is orbiting. And so we can assume that the sun is orbiting this, but its binary twin. But what if it's not? What happens if it's all orbiting the galactic center of the Milky Way? Excuse me 1 second. Sorry about that. So you can understand how so you can understand how we have, you know, where Nassim Haramein, sorry, that's where I was going with that, wasn't it? Where Nassim Haramein was talking about how we don't orbit the sun. Our Earth doesn't orbit the sun. It orbits whatever the sun is orbiting. And this is like orbits fit into different types of categories, it seems. And some things really do just orbit other things, and some things are orbiting the thing that they're orbiting orbits. As in the case I've just shown you here, both our sun and the dwarf planet actually effectively orbiting this other thing, and they're just in this kind of like, in this kind of binary relationship, but they're not locked into this big massive orbit as we've been truly led to understand. It's a more complex thing. And okay, so let's now go do another quick share, and we're going to go to, okay, so now we come to Jupiter at when is Jupiter at perihelion? And the date came up, which I thought was very very odd. It was Friday 20th of January, again, 2023. Now, you have to remember that because Fukushima went bang on the 11th of March 2011, 3 nuclear reactors blew up. The pollution that's gone into the air, the radiation, everything, the amount of cancers that are going off the radar around the world, all the rest of it, you know, are we supposed to, the whole reason for building those nuclear reactors was in the name of reducing carbon dioxide and coming up with something that didn't pump out with so much carbon dioxide, wasn't it? The same as, you know, Bill Gates is using this idea of coming up with a vaccine to somehow reduce the population of the Earth from 8 billion down to 5 billion. I don't know how he intends to do that. I can only guess. The mind boggles. I've been hearing that they've been doing sterilization programs in India, and certain people can't get pregnant anymore after having vaccines. How true all of this is, but is this what he's talking about? Is this what he means by this? You know, I truly do not know. But again, the whole goal of this is to bring us down to carbon zero. When we've got volcanoes and earthquakes pumping out carbon dioxide like never ever before. We just had like 40 volcanoes going off, actually spewing, sending vast amounts of obviously carbon dioxide in the air, plus all the earthquakes we're getting, producing massive amounts of carbon dioxide. And we haven't even mentioned the 29 new volcanoes on the on Antarctica, which is where all the melt is happening on the Pacific side of Antarctica. And we're not even talking about all the underwater volcanoes running from Hawaii right up to the Kamchatka Peninsula, 4,600 kilometers of underwater volcanoes spewing carbon dioxide. Why are we so desperate to hide all these figures and use these stories to push this nonsense, when we can see things like Fukushima happening? And also, ironically, in 1986, you remember on the 26th maybe of April 1986, we had Chernobyl. We had, you know, the reactor go bang. And I want to tie these in a little bit more with Jupiter now, just to give you a bit of an understanding, because I had no idea when I was looking at, well, where is the perihelion of Jupiter really? What is the official perihelion of Jupiter? Now, remember, 11th of March 2011. And this is going to potentially blow you away if you can get your heads around it. But if I go 11 years, 11 years, and what is Jupiter? About 11.89. So that's works out to, it's like 11.9 years. If I do the actual exact mathematics, which I'll show you in a second, of when Jupiter is supposedly closest to the sun. And if I then do the this is when it, sorry, if I do the exact mathematics of when of the orbital period of Jupiter added to the 11th of March 2011, so 11th of March 2011 plus 11.89 89 years, 12 years basically, but it's slightly less, 0.11 of a year less than 12 years. It is the 20th of January 2023, which I thought was just like, oh my God. I mean, they so obviously know this. The fact they put the whole orbital zodiac on the back of a coin, and then you get little nuggets like this where they show you the true perihelion point of not Jupiter, even to our sun, because we saw the kind of Jupiter perihelion point to our sun on the 17th of August 2017, and then a year later it was like the 28th of September 2018, and we had the tsunami in Indonesia. And then the 22nd of October. So this is 1 month and 1 year every year, you know. And then I think around about the 22nd of October, loads of video makers observed, you know, various satellites showing this massive gravitational anomaly occurring, just like the one that happened on the 17th of August 2017 when I come out to America that time. You know, we've seen the pattern. That was the perihelion point, the true perihelion of Jupiter, where it really is, to our sun, to where it really is in the bigger zodiac. This, on the 20th of January 2023, is the exact perihelion of Jupiter's moon to Earth. It's not the perihelion, sorry, it's the perigee. It's the perigee of Jupiter's furthest twin tail object and Earth. And they're just having a laugh. Or they really believe this stuff, but I cannot believe that, you know, they run this grand deception. So let me just show you what that looks like if we now come to, if we use all our pivotal dates, and we now come to, okay, yeah, so now we come to here, this date calculator, where I've put the 20th of January 2023 into the into it, and I've added, so we've got that date minus 11 years and 340 days, which equates to 11.89 years. Repeat it 40 times, and we started off on that date, and we come down to the 12th of March. It's basically the same thing, isn't it? 11th of March 2011. 2nd of May 1999, exactly when Carlos Ferrada said it would return. Now, how would he be able to give that specific date unless really he knew it was Jupiter all along? He must have known it was Jupiter all along. Or you just like, you know, and then we go back to June 1997. I remember when we got March 2011 here, or May 1999, or June 1987. Remember the storm in 87? Remember in 2011, March the 11th, 2011, and 1 year before, on the 27th of February 2010, massive 8.8 earthquake. Let me just shift very quickly over and just come back to our coin, and we see this dotted line here. This is the point of transit. This takes, you know, Jupiter can go round and around and around. It takes 12 years to go around, but it can go round once. It can go around once, twice, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times. So it can take, just, well, maybe not 5 times, because it's taking, the whole arc takes 80 years to go from here round to here. So 80 years to go from there round to there, you're talking about probably about 30 years. So once 12, 2 12 24, 3 12 to 36, about 3 cycles of Jupiter in each point of the transit, where we start off, where we start seeing what we think are comets in the sky in the first cycles, that where we're just starting to see comets as it comes in, it goes out, and then it comes around here and it comes in, it goes out. We get the 2010, 2011 point. There's 2 points, 2 cycles that are basically, or not 2 cycles of Jupiter going round, but there's 2 cycles of Earth going round our sun, 2 years, where we can be close to that point where Jupiter goes by in one of its cycles, and we can experience, in terms of sighting and seismology and volcanoes, maybe starting off very small but getting more and more intensive as we go past the central point, or we're over here and obviously going past this central point here, but just using the marker of this, of the amount of the effect either side of that. So and we just now come back to, so okay, we've got you back here on this chart now. So we're understanding that where it stops here on March 2011, it's March 2010 and 2011, which means here it's May 1998 and 99. Of course, 98 we saw Comet Halley-Bopp, just like we're like, oh, that's Comet Halley-Bopp, you know what I mean? It's just like June 96, June 1986, 1987, 86, we get Halley's Comet. Is it all starting to piece together? 86, when when Chernobyl goes bang. So when this thing goes by, we lose reactors. Okay, we might all choose just to totally ignore this and run this bullshit story, this grand deception that they operate to hide all this from us. But it is hidden in plain sight, isn't it? We can so all choose to see it. We can choose to try and sweep Chernobyl and Fukushima under the carpet because we may be too cool for this story. We may think we're too precious. We might think our carbon dioxide story is so precious and we're attacking our own if we don't stand with this nuclear industry and with this smothering fault lines and tsunami hotspots with nuclear power stations. And we're attacking our own if we don't back that agenda. Or back this agenda that Bill Gates wants, where we're just going to isolate. What is it we're going to do? We're going to isolate all of our all of the Wat Tyler genes that we've got that might subvert a proper, decent slave race from being subservient to their rulers. So what would we do? We'd isolate all the all the Wat Tyler genes. Wat Tyler, the peasants' revolt in 1381. That kind of, are we going to try and isolate all of those genes and just sterilize those people, soft kill? Is that, and if you didn't agree with that because he's using carbon dioxide, like Donald Trump just shouts out, of course I'm a Christian, and it's just like, oh, he's a Christian, it's all right, he can do anything he likes, you know what I mean? Just mention the word Christianity and that's it. Oh, he's a Christian, it's good. Or you mentioned that, I'm doing it for carbon dioxide. Listen, we're going to make this massive profit. We're going to get everyone injected. It's got to lower the population because, basically it's humanity's problem. You are of sin. Can you see how the carbon dioxide story blames you? You are the sinner. You done it. You're bad. All those shitty toasters that were mass manufactured and all those shitty products, like everything that's breaking, built with inbuilt obsolescence. So you've got to keep going and buying it over and over and over again. You can't just have one. You've got to produce so much more carbon dioxide and so much more other pollutants which aren't being mentioned in the carbon dioxide lie to push this whole carbon story, to push all for this new manufacture of everything that is slightly more efficient and it produces or consumes slightly less gas, even though you keep mass manufacturing it, doing it over and over again, producing much more carbon dioxide in the process of running the lie. The lie is just everywhere. Everything is upside down. Everything is insanely. Can you see how Christianity and this carbon dioxide story, and they're exactly the same. They're exactly the same story. Okay, they're told in a different way, but it's people that expect you to make horrible choices. Horrible. It's the sort of choices that Hitler was talking about. We were told that Hitler wanted this kind of like this special race that he was going to choose and everyone else was going to be eliminated. You know, I don't know if that's truly true, but is that not the same agenda when you're doing kind of like when you're deciding you're playing God with a sort of like a, so, you know, we go back and then we go to 1975, of course, that's around about the time Europe was created, and we were just coming into decimalization and everything else like that. And then you come to this point where 63, not, I mean, these are all cycles of Jupiter. This 1928, 1940, this would have been the most intense cycle here, the 1940, 1939, 1940, and of course 39, obviously when Carlos Rada predicted the Chile earthquake. And then we go back to the previous one there, and then we get to 1916, right in the middle of the First World War. Are we surprised? 1915, 1916, and then we come to the where it's just beginning to really affect us. And of course, that's 2003, 2004, 2003. Of course, Britain invaded Tibet. It's this ongoing pattern. You can get a much bigger idea. We get a much bigger overview of what's happening. Now, coming back to the 20th of January 2023, we don't know which is going to be the closest flyby in all of this to Earth itself. These might be the orbital tracks of Jupiter going round, but we're not specifically talking about Jupiter. We're talking about the twin tail objects that orbit Jupiter, furthest orbiting. So though that may be the kind of perihelion point, we don't know which is going to be the closest one. You know, every time this has flown by since 2015, I thought it was going to be the closest one. Certainly the one that's just gone by, I thought it was going to be the closest one. And the one that's just coming in, if it is coming in now, you know, like I say, 2018, I just didn't see it coming, did I? I just didn't see it coming. And for that flyby, I'd had the January ones absolutely guaranteed, sorted out, didn't I? You know, I said it was coming in, there it was. And I just didn't understand. We hadn't jumped, you know, it's only the sightings that can bring us to an understanding of what's going on. And so it's this process, you know, that we're seeing. It's, you know, I've made a lot of errors in this. I have. You know, I wish it was all backwards and that we'd had all the information up front. But we can see all these institutions have tried to conceal the absolute truth and lead you into a story that hides your galactic center. And now you've got an idea of your galactic center and where planet X is. And start building that. Start building that. You know, we'll do a meditation at some point, you know, and it's a really, really good idea to start giving your mind, with your eyes closed in a meditation, try and position yourself on the planet and try and position where you are really orbiting around where the planet is and exactly where in conjunction with the sun. And then where the sun is in conjunction with Jupiter and the planet X system. And then where that is all in conjunction with the Milky Way. And start doing meditations where you connect all those dots together. And I think you can start having a bigger picture. So sorry I'm not being very clear with all of this. So just little tiny bits of the aspects of the story. Let's just very quickly go over to that shot there. That was, that's Planet X. Alex Lujan, he's showing this image here. And ironically, he shows this image here, which was a little book about Carlos Rada's Herculobus by the looks of it, and he shows this image there. But can you also see, he says these two look very similar, but these lines on this, do they not look also a bit like Jupiter? That he defines this thing as this Jupiter looking, I mean, maybe he just couldn't say it was Jupiter. Maybe he knew it was Jupiter. Maybe they all knew and they've just been desperately trying to hide this, or maybe they just really couldn't figure it out. You know, I just truly do not know. But whatever has happened, we've watched this thing too many times. And when I saw that 50p coin, honestly, it took the wind out of my sails, really. I wasn't excited. I was like, it was like that scene with Charlton Heston when he's, you know, in the Planet of the Apes, when he discovers the arm of the Statue of Liberty coming up out of the ground. And he realized, oh my God. This is, you know, for him, I guess he realized it was just like that kind of like, he was in a different time. This is everything that had happened all but way before in his past. It was like, oh my God, this is just the same story going round and around. We're still in this same story, clinging to this kind of ancient astrophysics that is just so out of date and just so not representing the kind of the picture that we're seeing. We're all living in a, it's like we're not living in we're not even living in the steam age or something like that, or kind of like, you know, we're all living in the orbital mechanics of a period like 400 years ago. Insane. That is, it's utterly insane. And the story doesn't make any sense at all, doing the most ridiculously ludicrous things, and all in the name for profit. It's all just bullshit science. All just driven by corporations and all the rest of it, just to make money and to run a lie with a bunch of slaves running around like blue-ass flies, doing the most insane things in the name of carbon dioxide, in the name of this carbon dioxide lie. And okay, so that's really it there. You know, I will just say Nick Thomas and quite a few others have been showing epic images of something next to the sun. Quite a few people have been doing the same thing, and all I can tell you is that shot that I got on the 28th of August 2015, which was the first shot I got of the whole system myself. That shot, you think we know where Jupiter effectively really is in comparison to our sun. It's in what we would consider the October position. But in the previous year, it was in the September position. I know this doesn't fit with so much of our orbital mechanics at the moment, but it's because we've got a very skewed understanding, I'm of mind, of our solar system, and everything is starting to reveal itself because we are in a critical point of change now. In terms of all our orbital directions, everything is going to change now. And so new stories have to come up to account for that. For new science, new dwarf planets have got to be created and that sort of stuff. Everything's got to be put into a place to create keep the status quo of the grand deception, that you don't know who you are and you don't know where you are. And you know what you are, other than all the noise you think you are. Anyway, let's talk about a little bit of the big V word. The virus. A little bit. You know, I don't know where it's come from. I don't know who created it. But I want to just very loosely explore some possibilities. And I'm not saying one way or the other because I truly do not know, but you can imagine that we've got religious fanatics. I'm not talking about all Christians, and I'm not all talking about all of those who are in the carbon dioxide story that want Bill Gates' endgame for their own kids and for their, and they could believe that the only way to stop the bankers' insatiable greed is to put the gun to their own heads and pull the trigger. But is there another way of dealing with this problem other than going into self-suicide? In cell biology, when a cell can't destroy, or when a body that can't, in pathology, when you can't destroy a pathogen, the last phase of what they call it, the sympathetic pathway, the way in which the body deals with pathogens, its whole defense kind of protocol, starting with kind of inflammation and then kind of sending white blood cells and various different antibodies to the infected areas, and then more inflammation to drain out via the kind of lymph systems and everything else of that, all the infection and the debris of that kind of that war. And of course, in something like, say, what we're scared about with the flu is not this little virus that might affect us now. We're scared it's going to mutate into an influenza virus. It's going to combine somehow with an influenza and do what happened in 1917, 1918, where a comparatively low risk virus turns up in the trenches in Europe, coming from potentially America, but there's various different ideas of where it came from. And then gets into the trenches, gets with sick people, potentially with pneumonia, morphs into pneumonia, but becomes a very, very difficult. You've got to overcome the first stage of the virus. If you've had the first stage of the virus, then very likely, even if you do get the pneumonia virus, you've already combat. So it's just like a normal flu, a bit horrible, but not nearly as bad as an influenza combined with a virus that your body just doesn't know and it hasn't got. You're just playing for time to give your body enough time to fight it. But if there's not the time and the body starts suffering, the last phase of the sympathetic pathway is something called MAC, membrane attack complex. And that's where the cell walls detonate to stop themselves being taken over by the virus and uses factories to produce more of the virus. They produce MAC, membrane attack complex. And can you see, I've talked about Mars, and we can see the battle scars of Mars that Wolf Thornhill desperately wants to cover over with another religious story of this kind of like, of whatever he wants to call it, the thunderbolt, that it was all done by a thunderbolt, that you mustn't see this as the kind of like the end scar of Mars. This was just a thunderbolt. And of course, the reason you want to hide that is because if you can see what caused the endgame of Mars, then maybe you think, maybe that's not a good idea. Maybe we could charter a different course rather than taking a world into the same kind of end game that occurs when, say, a body has a pathogen it just cannot fight, and it has to do the only thing it can do, which is detonate the walls of its world, which is clearly what happened on Mars, where you see Valles Marianus has had this massive, great cataclysm which has caused this split, and all the water went down through the ground and into another realm completely, a dimensional tear that was opened up on Mars, where all the water disappeared out of and went somewhere else. And I can tell you where it went. It came here to Earth in this story that we simply can't believe, even though we can see where the water came up, the Emperor Hawaiian Seamount chain. And I know I talk about this a lot, but this is MAC. This is membrane attack complex, the final phase of what destroys a world when it goes into fission-based war, complete and utter hatred. The vibration goes so low that the only way to save the greater universe from such a low experience is to allow itself to destroy itself, allow itself to burn itself out. And that's when MAC occurs, and that's what happened to Mars. And a planetary migration, which involved destroying the planet in the process to save for the greater good. And imagine there's a bunch of people on this planet that are obsessed with membrane attack complex. They're obsessed with ghosting a planet because that which they have aligned with is from a broken planet. a ghost form from a broken planet that they have locked onto and assume they are God because they're in their heads. They're being transmitted into their heads, and they have to assume that's God, or whatever they assume that is, or I, whatever you want to give the name of that narrative that we think we are. Imagine if not all of it, but some of it is coming from different spaces and different places. Not all of it is actually what you truly are. Not all the noise you experience or what you think you are is potentially all just being viscerally created in you or transmitted to you just by your own, whatever you call it, soul. Or imagine if there's also a bit of a gray area that we could call other. And this subversion, this bringing us down, those who are tuned to this vibration where they absolutely gagging for war, they give gagging for divide. All those screaming out for Brexit, Europe, Johnny! Oh God, it was so disgusting. All the depleted uranium we dumped on Iraq and all the rest of it. Europe, Johnny! Oh my God, it was just so horrible, wasn't it? It was so disgusting. It just made you want to vomit. It just made you want to vomit. It made you low and depressed. You just knew it was and just saying that it was Europe that was trying to drag us into this free trade deal and everything else like that. And I know I repeat this, because it breaks my heart to see none of those that shouted out that Europe wants to drag us into a free trade deal. None of them have got the spunk to turn around and say, actually, we were blaming that on Europe, and now it turns out that you guys want that. It's just not part of what they are. It's just not part of what they are. Painful that we've begun this journey. But the thing is that this kind of want for divide and conquer and to feed us into this massive machine, could we not? Is there not a way for humanity to, instead of just destroying the whole Earth, like happened on Mars, could we not just conduct Mac on ourselves? If this is our lust for this fighting, warring, hating, nuclear obsessed, fission obsessed world, could we not conduct that? For those that want that, on ourselves, and just perform the Mac instead of on our own Earth. Just perform it to ourselves. So we could experience membrane attack complex without destroying the Earth. So those who were obsessed with it could have their biblical prophecy. Without redoing what happened on Mars. So you can get lost in who done this. But you can understand that the gains of getting this free trade in and what it would do to Europe if it gets carved up is terrible. As soon as we walked away, for every action there's a reaction. Was it Kepler's laws, or was that one of the? What was that? Ironically, Newton's laws. One of them, wasn't it? For every action there's a reaction. And there was going to be a reaction for trying to snare Europe in a free trade deal where it gets utterly carved up like that. There's going to be a reaction to that action. It's like, it's so drastic because we know the way in which it works. We know every part about it. We know those who rule over us we know what they're obsessed with because we've just seen so much of it. We've repeated it so many times. Think about how David Cameron bombed went to war in 2011, like barely a week after Fukushima happened. You would have thought he'd have been dropping aid on Japan, sand bombs on the kind of nuclear power stations and everything else of that to do it. No, all he could think about was dropping 11,000 bombing sorties of bombs on Libya and using Greece as the main go-between where he conducted all his bombing raids. It's just like they have to conduct war at this time, and they seem to like to make humanity look like barbarians, getting humanity to make unbelievably stupid choices, like building nuclear power stations on fault lines and blaming it on carbon dioxide. You know, what was incredible, when Fukushima went bang, you got this big carbon dioxide release coming from the ground from all the earthquake and volcanoes, or from the earthquake itself, and you could just see it bubbling up. Don't touch the sides, does it? Don't touch the sides. 4 nuclear reactors with Chernobyl. Doesn't touch the side against belief. When someone's in a state of belief, Jesus is coming. That's it. Locked on. See that? They don't see that. They see Jesus. You know, it's just a belief, isn't it? Jesus is going to fly down. He's going to come out of that thing. He's going to jump out, and he's going to wade around. He's going to run across a lake to prove he can walk on water. And so we've got that side, you know, we've got all these different stories of belief here. You know, one side saying, look, we just need to all put the gun to our head and blow our brains out, or actually, you don't blow in your hands, but join the ones, and then we'll choose the ones that get the vaccine and don't get the vaccine. You know, I don't know which way I'm going with it. I think that a virus, when we're overpopulated, would be best to be natural selection decides who gets it and who doesn't get it. That's my take on it. You know, we could wait till the American government has their kind of vaccine and hopefully let them choose who gets it and who doesn't get it, and give everything over to the power of the corporations and Bill Gates and his merry crew. Or we let natural selection decide. And I just don't know. I just don't know. I mean, you know, how do we decide this? How do we work this out? It's another story I heard by this woman called Dano, who made a video about 5G. And you know, I remember watching a video by Evolutionary Energy Arts, I think it is, and he talked a little bit about Trump holding up a board with CORO. What's iron in the periodic table? Fe. That Fe was Fe, but it had CORO Fe written on it, and it was apparently quite an old thing. And it was just like, he was asking whether Donald Trump really did know about the coronavirus, and of course, you know, SARS was a coronavirus, I think. MERS, whatever it was, MERS, whatever. But that was a coronavirus, I think, also. So it's not like it was brand new or anything else like that. But this idea, you know, what did the Fe mean? Was it like, you know, where Evolutionary Energy was going with it? And he wasn't being like, it's this and it's that. He was just playing with ideas. In actual fact, he said he sat in a bath and he just thought about it, and he had the notion that could it be a disease that's designed specifically to attack blood orders that are not halflings, that only attacks pure red-blooded, kind of like iron-blooded humans, rather than blue-blooded humans that might be iron and another type of blood mix, possibly copper or Cu or something like that. You know, depending where they've come and how they what metals they need in their blood to best support life, so they can retain the elements and minerals that they need to kind of like make respiration and the process of energy as possible, so they can live and exist. you know, this biological life programs, how they're all put together and that sort of stuff. We just don't know. We just don't know. But it was an interesting idea, that FE, when he was talking about what Trump was talking about. But this woman she took it in another direction, not specifically Trump holding the board, but when I saw the FE, I immediately thought of the oxygen dissociation curve that's, you know, in anatomy and physiology. And I'm throwing some big terms here in terms of anatomy and physiology. I don't know that much about it. I did study degree level anatomy and physiology. So I have got basic anatomy and physiology and pathology on a kind of degree level, but actually they're really, really quite basic. You know, they're really, really quite basic, which is probably why they're called degrees, because it's a degree of knowledge. And you kind of go into, say, the Krebs cycle and electron transfer and what's really happening in, say, intracellular respiration, which is the real respiration, not where you're breathing in. That is not respiration. The actual respiration process, as I'm understanding it, is actually happening in the cell and is the process of turning. Well, it's not even the process, but is it the process? Is it the process of turning sugar into adenine triphosphate, and the various processes of breaking sugar down into glucose and glucose into glycogen, is it? And glycogen, and then going down into ADT, adenine triphosphate. And of course, plants do the same thing. They take the glucose and they use the sunlight and photosynthesis to turn the glucose into adenine triphosphate. And it's the adenine triphosphate which is the energy currency of the body. That process of producing that is respiration, not just breathing air into the body. That process is done in the cell, in an animal cell or in a human cell. It's like it's done in what's called the mitochondria, and it's an organelle within the cell, and it's intracellular respiration. It's cutting, you know, and this is the process that produces the adenine triphosphate, which is the energy currency. And imagine slowing that process down. When we talk about, imagine pumping carbon dioxide into a soda stream. We push it in, we take the lid off after we've done it, we put it on the side. The carbon dioxide doesn't shoot out and bubble out everywhere. Like imagine compressed air in a space, and you open the lid off, you take it off, all the air pushes out, and it's just high pressure. And that's not going to happen. It's going to really release a little bit of gas, but you're going to see it's holding long loads of gas, and if you excite it, it releases it. And that's because it's not a covalent bond that's holding the CO2 to the H2O. It's a much lighter bond, and it's a very similar bond that's holding carbon dioxide onto the hemoglobin in blood. And that's why when blood goes to an area, if it's carrying oxygen, it goes to an area which is very kind of like high in carbon dioxide and very low in oxygen. It needs oxygenating. It will then release the OO and take on board, and then immediately take on board the CO2, which is O and O with a C attached to it. Now, we know that when we breathe in carbon monoxide, what happens is the carbon monoxide attaches to the hemoglobin, and it's a covalent bond that we can't break, which renders the white blood cell basically, or the hemoglobin, useless. It's finished. It's got to be recycled, and it's done. And that's because it can't release the carbon monoxide, because only one oxygen. It's too. The bonds are so light with CO2 and H2, CO2 and O2 that that when carbon monoxide, like I say, attaches to hemoglobin, it's just game over for the hemoglobin. Now imagine if with some kind of device you could, say, simulate with a frequency. We know that we can shake the hydrogen, the H2 off oxygen with pulse width modulation. By putting a frequency through water, we can shake the water and the hydrogen and the oxygen shake at different rates, and we make a hydroxy mix by that. or what's sometimes called Brown's gas, where in the water becomes a mix of hydrogen and oxygen, and they're separated, but they're all in the mix together. If you put a match to it, as the gas comes up, it's so explosive because it's a perfectly balanced mix. It's got all the oxygen, all the hydrogen it needs, all in the perfect mix. You put a match to it, it's not like a bang, a slow bang. It's a sudden, instantaneous crack. It's the very same crack that occurred when Fukushima went bang and the whole roof shot mile up into the sky because the water got so heated and so excited by the heat, it separated into hydrogen and oxygen and immediately exploded, recombined into water in a sudden instant. And that explosion pushed the whole roof of Fukushima a mile up into the sky. That's why you can't put water on them. That's why they couldn't put water on Chernobyl. Now imagine putting a frequency through air and splitting O2, and you need O2 to be able to jump on and make CO2 jump off your hemoglobin. Imagine breathing an air full of a lung full of air, and you've still got all the same partial pressure of all the gases there. But imagine if you could separate all the O2s with O's, just with a frequency. I don't know if this is the case. There's so many different ideas of what happened in China and why the fact that all the top Chinese and Iranian officials seem to have got it straight off. It's almost like they wanted to get it before any mutation or anything else like that. Funny, the Pope got it as well. I mean, you know, in terms of a religious agenda, yeah, I could see fundamental religious or religious people out there wanting to do something, wanting to fulfill their biblical prophecy in some way or other. And I'm not talking about all Christians here. I'm talking about, because there's those who follow in faith and just want to be good, lovely people. And there's those who are obsessed with power and control and take on these demonic energies. And at some point, you have to confess you're a sinner with the Catholic Church, don't you? I wonder if there gets to a certain level, if you want to get to the inner sanctum, I wonder if you don't just have to confess you're a sinner. I wonder if you actually have to prove it. It's a funny old thing, isn't it? But we've got religious extremists out there, and how do you stop a bunch of religious extremists that have locked onto Mac? How do you do that? You know, China tells us religion is poison. I can kind of understand that now. Where we turn science into kind of religions. We're not really interested in what the science says. Once we've actually created the religion, then we just go down that naturally created corridor that's been created by the mindset of thousands of years of being ruled by these beliefs. It's very easy to fall back into it. These carbon dogs are, okay, kill everyone. Oh, it's a Christian. Oh, it's okay, you can kill him then. It's good, man. It's a Christian. It's just a little bit thin on the ground if you're not kind of like in that doctrine. How do you stop that? How do we stop NATO, Britain and America going into this kind of like full scale, dragging Europe into another nasty war and doing the process? Yeah, Johnny. Paid, Sun newspaper running the hate campaign. Rupert Murdoch and his merry men. So much power with such a small bunch of people to create so much suffering on that planet. Incredible. So I don't know what to do now. I really don't. I got no forward kind of direction. We just got to sit back and just let people be and do what they do. The lunatics are definitely running the asylum at the moment, aren't they? They really are. They really are. Anyway, this is what Brexit was always going to look like. It was always going to be ugly, and it's going to and if it's allowed to go its full course, obviously, it will go into a full-scale savage war. Everything will be destroyed to kind of open ourselves up so we can go for a new system. To go for that new system, a lot of sacrifices will have to be made. And this is what this time is, isn't it? It's the time where we go to the thorny hill and make the sacrifice. No one knows who the Isaac Newton's going to be for the next, who's going to be the kind of saints in Isaac Newton for the next age, who's going to be the kind of like the Galileo's, the name. Is it going to be Wall Thornhill? Who's it going to be? Is it going to be, I can't remember the name of the guy that came up with Eris. Is it going to be him? Is it going to be Dave Dobbs? I don't think so. You can see how obvious my timeline is, and you can see how much they all know the timeline. It's written on the back of a 50p coin. The rarest 50p out of all of them. The only one that you're so cheap to buy on the internet because no one really knows what it means. Even the gold ones they couldn't sell. It's a bit like the Brexit 50p coin. It's total catastrophe. He actually expected people to go out. I mean, it gives you an idea of how deluded. It's like Margaret Thatcher turning up in 1982 to kind of like China and expecting sort of like Deng Xiaoping just to sort of drop everything for her. Just went completely the opposite direction. But, you know, certainly the blame game, you know, Britain have become so used to blame, and it's just blamed all the depleted uranium, all the wars, and everything is done with this apathy and apathetic kind of hatred of, it's just doubting state that it applies to everything. And it applied it to Europe and blamed everything on Europe. And here we are. Now we are experiencing Brexit. And for every little bit that we hold on to this idea of this free trade deal, this delusion that this might happen, well, like I say, wherever there's so much to gain, there's often so much to lose. And, you know, Boris Johnson said in his big speech when he announced that we're going into this free trade deal, and he said, this is not a race to the bottom. Remember, this is always double speak. Everything they say this is not about is always what it's about. And this is, for Britain and America, all the time we're attached to this. We are going down. We are in a race to the bottom of the pond. And already, all the pension funds, all of those who voted for Brexit, but they've lost everything already. All their pension funds are all gone. They've been utterly annihilated. You didn't know the power of the choices. It's cause and effect. All the old people voting for Brexit. Yeah, Daddy. It's funny, written on the back of the 50p coin that was the Brexit thing. It was just like, so peculiar. The division and the savagery that it's caused and what's written on the coin. It's just the biggest joke on the planet. It's offensive to think this about unity, destroying the European alliance. All you Brexiteers out there, I hope this is everything you wanted. I hope this is everything you wanted. All your dreams come true. But you've got an opposition out there that's reacting to it, and they don't want to go under the wheels of your free trade deal to be carved up by it. And now you get your naked lunch. Your William Burroughs naked lunch. You know, you get to see what's around the really end of the fork that you've chosen. Nice. So who knows? Now we go into this next phase. Is it coming in? Truly, I really don't know. Or do I? Or do you? Last of all, we're just going to jump over to We do another little. Yeah, so we just come over here and we just look at Voyager 2 launched August 20th, 1977. Visited Jupiter in 1979, Saturn 1981, Uranus in 1986, before making its closest approach to Neptune on August 25th, 1989. So it left in 77, and then in 89, 12 years later, it discovers, can you see how when we go back over here to the date calculator, 1975, 1974, 75, around about that time, we've got Jupiter coming by, and then it comes by again in 1987. Can you see how this would have been this kind of perihelion point, or this closest point to the planet X system? This would have been our sun coming around this point here, and then Jupiter and Saturn over here. This is their closest aspect. This is when they could have got much closer. They could have got much closer to Jupiter than any other point in their cycle, other than this point over here and this point over here. So they weren't sending, obviously back in 39, they weren't sending satellites out to space, but certainly here, this is the point where they could jump up to Jupiter, to go from here to Jupiter and get there without actually, it's the only point they could have really mathematically done that. Of course, they couldn't tell you the story there. I mean, imagine, the distance, to go and visit all of those different planets that are orbiting around our sun, to do them all in 12 years. Some of them are like 240, Neptune 165 years, Uranus 84 years. What are the chances of really getting to all of those different places in that amount of time? The stories they give you are so ridiculously crazy. And we believe them over and over again because we just cannot look at the real logical kind of like orbital mechanics of what we're seeing. Take care, lovely people. I just thought I'd leave you with that little note of just like you can just see why they orbited it, why they've taken that, why they went off at that point. It's just, we're just seeing the simplicity of it now. We're seeing the simplicity of it all now, and unfortunately, so many of us are locked in stories, locked in a grand deception to hide you and conceal your galactic center. No, that's coming down now, if you want it to. I've got a funny feeling it's not our government's organising this flu virus. Might be. They want to take advantage of it to their own advantage, but I've got a funny feeling it might be the Chinese that are doing it. But I don't truly know. I know Bill Gates has openly put his hand to it, put up his hands to it, with his just wanting to reduce the population from 8 billion down to 5 billion with vaccinations. What does he mean by that? He keeps saying it over and over and over again. So he's obviously quite serious. And Trump has just gone and decided he's going to give him billions. So it's just like, oh my God, what have we created with this monster? So it could be also that it's Bill Gates and it's the whole kind of Agenda 21. Could be the Chinese, that they just see what's coming over the hill and decided they want to kind of do their own form of membrane attack complex, just because they know that they're not going to comply with the trade deals that are going to be pushed onto them, which means they're going to have a massive population working population where they can't give work to, which is going to turn into a kind of like which the Western governments could use to create destabilization and start turning into a, selling weapons to and all that sort of stuff, and creating civil wars in China with the lack of employment, lack of jobs. Maybe this is China cleaning house. We truly don't know. Maybe this virus is sent by God. Really. Maybe it's all by design. All we know is that in this country we made choices. We tried to blame Europe for everything the British and American government had done. And now this might be the rest of the world that we're blaming, that we want to feed into this, is reacting for this. And they know this story so well, what we do, don't they? They know this story so well. We all know this story so well. What the Christians do at these times. In their obsession with sin and paedophilia. Confess you're a sinner. You've done it. Own it. I confess I'm a lover, not a sinner. Take care. Ciao.